Okay, welcome to the final episode of my 10,000 miles road trip series. For those of you who are still with me in this journey, thank you so much for spending over an hour on my adventures. That's very impressive. Now that I had traveled through Nevada, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and South Dakota, there were only 3 more states to go before I re-entered California. In this episode, I'm going to cover the rest of my adventures in South Dakota, along with the things I experienced in Wyoming, Idaho, Nevada, and California. This video is proudly sponsored by Mr. Nobody. So if you want to support this channel and to hear the stories from all over the world, you can subscribe, comment, and like. Back to the story. I said goodbye to Joan's family, packed a simple lunch before leaving Pier, and continued the journey to Mount Rushmore. The drive took me about 3.5 hours. At this point, I had already seen too many roadkills, but the amount of roadkills I saw in this part of America was absolutely outrageous, and I feel inclined to bring up this issue. There was indeed a fence that stops animals from getting too close to the highway, but unfortunately, it wasn't tall enough to stop the antelopes, or low enough to stop skunks from crossing. As a result, I encountered groups of antelopes walking on the highway every now and then, and saw way too many dead animals on the road. Sometimes it was just one antelope, sometimes a couple of them piled on top of each other, sometimes a skunk, sometimes a dead bird or wolf that was trying to eat the roadkills before it itself also got killed. Drivers had to be on high alert driving through this area, otherwise they could end up dead too. I had heard terrible stories and had seen way too many billboards with signs like this. When I arrived at the foothill of Mount Rushmore, the rain began to pour. I grabbed my lunch from the trunk and started eating, hoping the rain would stop soon. Well, it didn't stop completely, but it had lightened after I finished my food. Mount Rushmore was magnificent. It doesn't need any introduction. I first read about this place on a magazine when I was 11 years old. I couldn't have imagined years later I would be seeing them with my own eyes. Anyway, I learned a lot from the tour guides I ran into. It was mostly about what a great president Theodore Roosevelt was, because obviously, comparing to these guys, Teddy didn't really stand out. In addition to that, I personally don't like Teddy that much for the things he did in Central and South America, such as the construction of Panama Canal, and of course, the infamous Banana Wars. After Mount Rushmore, naturally one should go check out Crazy Horse Memorial. These two places are like Tom and Jerry, Romeo and Juliet. They go hand in hand. About 30 minutes later, I arrived at the foothill of Crazy Horse Memorial. It started raining again the moment I stepped inside the memorial. Here, I learned something completely different. The guide gave us a lecture on the Great Sioux Nation and its leaders, including Red Cloud, Sitting Bull, and the most famous of them all, Crazy Horse. After the lecture, she and some younger volunteers gave us a quick demo on their traditional dances. It was pretty interesting, but probably not so interesting to this little boy. The sun was going down quickly. I rushed to my car after the visit and started driving west. The Airbnb I booked was in a small town called Gillette. It was about 2 hours drive from where I was. Gillette was a small mining town. There wasn't much to see, but it was a wonderful place to rest because there was a great Mexican place and apparently someone was having the time of his life eating that fajita. My Airbnb host Jenny had 3 big dogs and 2 cats. Honestly, I was a bit scared when I first stepped out of the car, because these Wyoming dogs were extremely wild and certainly knew how to bark effectively. But as soon as I was accepted by the alpha dog, Leo, all the worries went away. Leo was a 9-year-old majestic hound. He was tall and handsome, but according to Jenny, he didn't have much time to live. Leo was in fact very ill. He had lung cancer and tumors everywhere. It was hard for me to process this harsh information when Leo was laying on the carpet looking at me with his big, innocent eyes. But it is what it is. The next morning, Jenny's cat woke me up. She was a black beauty, Till this day, I still remember the way she purred. I had some cereal for breakfast, spent nearly an hour talking to a couple who lived next door about Jesus. After they finished praying for me, I started driving again. That prayer meant something to me because I was about to drive through the infamous Wind River Reservation. For those of you who haven't seen the movie called Wind River, here are some of the takeaways.
Luck don't live out here.
In conclusion, Wind River was a land full of unforgiving things, and I reckoned I could use some help from Jesus. Anyway, about 7 hours later, I arrived in this little town with only 2,000 residents, Pinedale. Since I didn't book my place ahead of the time and didn't want to spend over $100 on the bed, I ended up staying in a trailer. As someone who had never slept in a trailer before, it was a unique experience. Everything was tiny here. The stove, the fridge, the toilet, the bathroom. But hey, the bed was big enough and the place was cute. The only problem was Pinedale could get really cold at night, even in summer. The temperature dropped rapidly after the sunset and there wasn't much I could do about it because that trailer was pretty much off the grid. The next morning, I made a simple breakfast and hit the road again. After some Googling, I decided to hike the Jenny Lake Trail in Grand Teton National Park. It was day 55 of my road trip, and to be honest, I was quite exhausted. It was a very successful hike. The view was obviously breathtaking. I mean, come on, this was Grand Teton. But I didn't realize there is a surprise waiting for me. So I was walking along on this trail, and all of a sudden I heard something moving about 40 yards off the trail. I stopped walking immediately and took a closer look, only to realize it was, you guessed it, a black bear. I stopped making any sound, I even stopped breathing, and started walking back until I found other hikers on the trail. I told them about the bear, and eventually 5 or 6 of us decided to walk together as a group. One of them had a bear spray. In the end, we passed the bear safe and sound. It was the first time I encountered a bear in the wild, and I can't say I enjoyed it very much. Consequently, I was on high alert throughout the rest of that hike and was very, very exhausted. Gotta say, after encountering that black bear, hiking suddenly became less attractive to me. Later that day, I checked into the most idyllic hostel I had ever been to. It was called Teton Hostel HideAway B&B. 2 hours drive from Jenny Lake and was sitting right on the Wyoming-Idaho border. It was clean, quiet, $45 per night, breakfast included, didn't allow any smokers and drinkers in, and the scenery was just spectacular. I canceled all of my plans of hiking other trails on the next day and decided to enjoy this place instead. Besides, the Thai restaurant nearby, Bangkok Kitchen, sold the most legit pad Thai I had ever had in the land of Americas. The next day, I relaxed in every way possible a person can get relaxed. Had breakfast, watched a movie, talked with other travelers, made lunch, pet the Great Dane, saw a glorious sunset and an even more glorious moonrise, flew my drone a couple more times. It was a very magical place. I could feel the wilderness in the air, feel the spirit of the sun, the moon, and the forest. After the dinner, I spent about an hour in a graveyard nearby and read every single tombstone. There were families that had been living here for generations, families that completely disappeared after 2 generations, an entire family that died on the same day, and nearly every family had lost a young man on the battlefields. Some was born and died on the same day, some almost reached 100 years old. Some couple had married for over 60 years and their deaths was just over a month apart. Some was slightly older than me but died at the age of 15. Life is just what happens between the date of birth and the date of death. It means nothing to anyone but you. I left Grand Teton the next day and arrived in Boise 7 hours later. On the way there, I saw at least 3 tornadoes and a locust swarm. Drove past a federal prison and a sign saying, "Do not stop for the hitchhikers." Anyway, the drive was okay. I went to a city store, washed the office, and hit the road again on the next day. After another 7 hours of driving, I reached Reno. By that time, I was too tired to do anything. I only remember going to a Vietnamese restaurant, having this beautiful food. Now that California was only miles away, the countdown had begun. The next morning, I texted my friends in North Cal, told them my schedule, and left Reno. It felt great to be back on the California road again. Everything looked so familiar. At about 1 p.m., I got super hungry and was craving for some Korean food. So I made a quick layover in Sacramento for lunch. And the place I ended up going was incredible. There were 16 different side dishes. I couldn't believe my luck and finished them all satisfyingly. It was a wonderful meal. San Francisco was like an old friend. I walked around the Golden Gate Park, had beers, and exchanged a lot of stories with my old friends from college. I reconnected with the Japanese guy I met in Williams, Mr. Hiroshi. It was fun having lunch with him exactly 2 months later. I also spent a night in San Jose, went to the headquarters of AMD and Nvidia. It was exciting to finally see the company I had been investing for years. And as I was taking this picture, a plane took off right behind the Nvidia logo. What are the odds, right? That evening, I had dinner with another friend of mine, Jeff, and said goodbye to North Cal. My final stop before going back to LA was Bakersfield. I explored the mountains nearby, made some food, and watched some movies. I drove back to LA 2 days later and moved into a new apartment. Well, just like that, I completed a 10,000-mile solo road trip in my old Honda for 65 days from LA to LA, crossing 18 states. It was an extraordinary experience and taught me something important. To never be afraid of risk or failure, because growth always involves the risk of failure. Moreover, the biggest risk a person can take is to do nothing. I'm sure spending 65 days in LA could be fun and exciting too, but I must admit the adventures of the solo road trip were way more exciting. So let me share some stupid and corny quote like, "It's not about the destination, it's about the journey." Thank you very much for watching. If you want to support this channel, you can subscribe, comment, and like. It all helps out. If you have anything else you'd like to know, leave a comment or hit me up at my Instagram at JingWuShow. Your support is my biggest motivation. See you in the next adventure.